All right. Hey, everyone. I am here with Laura and Sarah, and it's me, Jared. I'm really excited about today. Today, we're going to get into the topic of sacred sexuality, and I want to introduce you guys to Sarah Hall. Sarah Hall is a spiritual life coach, and she's also an angel healer. Am I getting that right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, just wanted to make sure I got that right. An angel healer. She also does a lot of work online. She has her own YouTube channel, which we've shared in the link right there. But we're just going to dive right into it. Sarah, thanks so much for taking time out to be here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I've been so looking forward to this discussion.
Me too. We've been building it up for the last week, so we got some good people waiting to see what's coming on.
Yeah, there's a lot of momentum. Should we start with, because this is a conversation that Jared and I were having on the live last week, talking about the awakened feminine and the awakened masculine and any energy around that. I mean, obviously, yeah, we bring them together to create something pretty special. But the awakened woman and the awakened man, because they're awake consciously in their own way, and they have their own way of being, which is right for them. I think a lot of people, I don't know about you, but when I had my awakening, there was this sense of like wanting the guys to be like I was and wanting to meet men like me. So I kind of realized, oh, hang on a second, they have their own thing that is so sacred. So did you want to talk a little bit about what your opinion is with like the feminine, the awakened, and the non-awakened, if you want to go in that direction as well?
I love talking about masculine and feminine because I think that key to each woman or man awakening his or her own divine feminine or masculine or sexuality as it stands is to understand that we all, no matter what gender we identify as, have both masculine and feminine energies inside of all of us. And I think that it's so interesting what you say, in that it's like, like as a woman, and being on this path where I'm like awakening and everything's very exciting. I'd love to meet a guy that's kind of on the same wavelength. That I think is so interesting, and so is such a common thread that I see among a lot of women, because in this time that we live in right now, it's a great time to be a woman, right? We've got a lot of, opportunities and abilities to express ourselves in ways that are, increasingly getting stronger. Well, we've lived in a society that has had masculine dominant energy for a very long time. And this is not just to say it's because, well, men have been more in control. It's also because what we could define as basic masculine energy is what we value culturally more. So when we say we've all got masculine and feminine inside of us, if we look back at that as being like, yin and yang, these kinds of things, masculine energy is an energy that it's very logical or structured. Essentially, it holds space. It's a container. It is in the realm of form. It sees everything in the light. So in other words, it sees things as they are. It makes sense of things. It's great at making lists and organizing and all that. Our society loves that kind of energy. It loves that kind of energy. It's lost touch a little bit, however, with feminine energy, which again, all of us have inside of us. And it's that side that sees in the dark. In other words, it can see the magic time when there are multiple layers to reality. There are things that can be seen between just the surface forms that are what they are. It's the intuitive part. It's the receptive part. It's the part that can rely on instinct and flow in the same direction as the energy of the wild or the energy of nature. We've taken a lot of time to kind of tame ourselves not to do that in the ways that we have created our societies, but I think it's still very healthy and so necessary when we talk about the awakening of the feminine on a collective scale, for us to say, yes, we as a whole, as a human global tribe, kind of need that. We kind of need more of that trust in ourselves and validation in ourselves at the level of emotion and instinct and trust and all of these kinds of things. So I kind of think that it's important to just sort of explore both of those qualities in all human beings and see how each individual, whether they identify as male or female, want to express those kinds of things. And I've just always found that interesting, I guess.
Sarah, I loved what you said about humanity kind of being at this point where they need to switch away from just like our culture's always valued the more masculine energy. But I love the point that you make there, because what I'm starting to see, not just in my life, but now in my family's lives and the men around me, it's almost like there's a lot more individuals who are falling into their feminine energy and are learning how to access that. And because obviously our planet, we're like, there's the whole I guess healing narrative of we're tearing the planet apart with masculine energy. We're trying to dominate industries, businesses are expanding, and corporate, all this other stuff. But I know that none of that would actually happen if collectively as a species, humanity was balanced in their masculine energy and in their feminine energy. It just wouldn't show up. Have you seen a shift, at least in your work and from the way that you experience the world, where individuals are falling more into this energy?
Totally. Oh my gosh, I love everything that you said. Yes, yes, yes. The cool thing about that is, I loved how you said, I'm observing that there are men who are, embracing more of their feminine energy, that kind of thing. And it's true, because I think that our culture is giving men permission a little bit more to have feelings. Like, you're allowed to be human, you're allowed to cry, you have feelings, you're allowed to get in touch with this side of you that is strong. And that actually makes you more available to have very deep and meaningful relationships in your life with women, with whomever. So that's absolutely, I think, a thing that's happening more and more. And I also totally agree that, as we do get in contact with having a balance between both masculine and feminine energies as individuals, and then also as a culture, it makes it so that we have a perspective where we simply don't do so much of that taking advantage of nature and all of that stuff. Because let's say, okay, again, the feminine side, if that's the side of us that's connected to our instincts, right? It kind of surrenders to the forces of nature and flows in the same direction of it. It's not afraid to tap into the collective side of our consciousness. Whereas our masculine side, which we all need, it's valid, it's valuable. I love our masculine side, is more of like the individual ego. The feminine thinks with the tribe. So our feminine side is the side that says, well, I can't just go for these short-term profits that screw me over for long-term sustainability and health and well-being, because if I'm hurting another person, then in a way that's hurting me too, because we're collective. If I'm hurting the earth, that's hurting me too. So when we have an integrated, I think, spiritual psychology, I guess, of both sides of the masculine and feminine, you're totally right. It does help us to live more wholly, I think.
Absolutely. And I love what you say about if you hurt, because it's true, we're all one energy, right? We're all droplets of water in the same ocean. So if I am cruel to you, I'm cruel to myself. And it's funny, and you've probably seen this around you. I was walking past someone's home the other day, and they were arguing, and when you look at it from that feminine energy, it's like, wow, you're literally yelling at yourselves.
Yes.
You're calling yourself names. You're being so cruel. And then you step away and you wonder why life is so tough. And it's because you're just putting out all this energy. Because you see it, it's like, well, you're putting it out and it's just coming right back. And then all the aggression, all the anger is just coming right back in full cycle. So how did you discover this? Like, were you like some people where you were born with all these sort of gifts and you're trying to find your way in the world? Or did you have suddenly this sort of knowing or this awakening where you looked around and suddenly thought, hang on a minute, everything's not quite as we see it?
Yes. Well, I'm one of those that has always had a lot of intuitive sensitivity throughout my life. And it wasn't until, like my very early adulthood years that I was able to call it that and understand that that's, what it was functioning in my life. But once I did have, sort of a language to put around it, I was able to do more to support that kind of intuitive thinking. And that really helped me with, kind of having a little bit more of a perspective on some of the things like we're talking about and observe things like this, because I started to create an intentional spiritual practice, which I think for anyone, and I think we actually are all intuitive. I think that just some of us have more of a sensitive leaning to it. Others maybe have it in a different way, but we can all tap into it. Every single one of us can open that up. I don't feel special. I try not to say that I am, for I guess seeing things the way that I do. But for me, it was creating a spiritual practice around my intuitive experiences that I had been having repeatedly that allowed me to begin to start to see all of my life, whether I was in meditation and, working on myself spiritually, or whether I was just out in my regular everyday life, that there is a connectedness to all of us. That is the unmistakable truth. When anyone who's got a lot of intuitive sensitivity is looking at the world, it's like, wow, everything is connected. I feel sensitive and I'm picking up intuitive, things from other people because we are one in the same. And you're absolutely right that it's like with relationships, when you mentioned you see people arguing and it's like you're calling yourselves names. I always tell people that like with our relationships, and this totally applies to sacred sexuality too, we attract exactly perfectly what we kind of need. We attract little like fragments of mirror that help us see inside ourselves more. So we might not always attract exactly what we think we want at some level, but we always seem to attract whatever it is that can kind of catalyze us, it seems like, spiritually the most.
Sarah, I'm really excited to go into this next point with you because, we all do very similar work. And one of the most, I guess, I don't want to say aggravating, but I think that is the right word for it maybe, is when you are connecting with a person, either in a call, a client connection, and you see their mirror play out through you.
Yes.
You have this experience?
Oh, yes. I think that is just the stuff of human life.
Yes.
It seems to be a thing that is it's universal no matter where you are. And I think that, especially when you do this kind of work, I always tell people too, especially if I'm coaching them to go into this kind of work, hey, this is everything that you're teaching about is stuff that you're also learning at the same time. You are for your whole life going to be simultaneously a student and a teacher of these kinds of things. So you're going to attract opportunities where the mirror is a two-way street and you're experiencing some insights and things that will help you to learn too at the same time. So absolutely. I think I like to tell people too, and I think this is true, that relationships are like, no matter what kind they are, like the ground zero of where some of the most spiritually transformational work happens because of that ability to see into the self through having to connect and collaborate and put ourselves together and make ourselves work. It's the strongest place for that transformation is relationships, I think.
Yeah, totally. I've noticed that because the people that we love the most are going to show us the most in ourselves. We're going to be more aware of it, right? Because they're connected to us in such a heavy way. And I don't know if you see this, but in the community, there seems to be this. We're all very higher, especially the women. We're very higher chakra based, and I've had to learn to come to the ground and be in the root. But with relationships and connections, when we start wanting to put ourselves out there to have a relationship, and even when we talk about like sexuality and tantra and things, it's very important to embody all of the energies, right? Because it's like we can be the most awakened person sat in meditation on the beach, but how awakened are you when you have a person right in front of you all the time, every day? That's when you're really going to learn about yourself, right? Because everyone can, like I live on my own, everyone can be calm and living on their own. Everything's easy. But if I lived with someone, or if I was, if I have a relationship with me right there all the time, that's when you're going to know more about yourself. Because it's like, well, that's how I handled that situation. That triggered me. That's what I'm doing right now. And so there's this sort of, some people in the collective believe that life is about being individual. And Jared and I talked about this last week, where it's like, I have to do everything on my own. I have to heal everything on my own. I'm independent. I don't need anyone to make me happy. but it's like this trap, and they maybe don't realize yet that actually having people around you is where you're going to learn the most, because it's right in front of your eyes. You see it, you taste it, and it's right there. So with relationships, especially romantic ones, they are literally going to show you the most, right? About who you are.
Yes. You know, oh my gosh, you really hit something for me when you were mentioning that, like women have our energy. A lot of times we're up here in these upper chakras. We like to be up in this realm, and we need to ground things. It reminded me of an experience maybe a few years ago. I had someone that I was coaching where, you know, there was a blockage around relationships and particularly sexuality. And it came down to that there were these really lofty, high expectations all up here. I want this spiritual connection. I want this perfect Prince Charming to do all these things on my list. I want the love connection to be perfect and all of these things. But then it became such a thing where the expectations were so high that it was almost as if fear was sort of tinging the way that she was seeing, you know, what she was trying to manifest. It was like perfectionism does that. Sometimes fear is the man behind the mask of perfectionism, I think. And there was this fear of letting the energy of what she really wanted to manifest come from up here. I want this spiritual connection, this intellectual connection. I want this heart connection to go down into the body, and then also down into the practical, real, physical world, you know, where there is relating and connecting and meeting and grounding, you know, the relationship. Because the relationship, no matter how magical and divine and beautiful and in love you feel, still you have to come down to the everyday stuff where you are sharing a life together, and there are unglamorous moments where you argue about doing the dishes, or you know, whatever else might happen if you've got a partner. So grounding these kinds of things and having a balance between those two sides of the spectrum is really, really important from a relationships side and also from a sexuality side, because this same particular client I'm recalling, so I'm so glad that you kind of like jogged my memory on this, was able to have better sex essentially as a result of literally breathing the energy that she had all up here, stuck up here, down the lower chakras. She wasn't making the connection because she felt safer up here. So it was like, I'm not going to let any of my focus go down to my lower chakras or down into my physical body and be able to make this connection, because there's fear that's holding it back, because all this perfectionism is right up there. So it's definitely important to make that balance. Yeah.
I love the idea of having it up here, but then the reality of it being down in the lower chakras is something completely different. I was just talking to a client earlier today, and it finally occurred to me that she was in love with the idea of a particular relationship, but the reality of it as it was playing out in her life was very different. I think that's such an important distinction to make, because we get conditioned by society, by movies, by stories that, oh, this is the perfect ideal relationship. This is what love looks like. And some people are so enthralled with the idea and the narrative that when it actually shows up in their life in grounded reality, and you have those little moments where you're arguing over the dishes or something like that, where it doesn't match up with the person's narrative, and then immediately they're like, okay, I got to bounce out. Like, this is not the relationship I look for. Like, you're not awakened. In fact, I know a client's on this right now who's experienced this recently, where her partner was like, well, you're getting upset about this little thing, so you're not awakened and you're lowering my energy right now. And it's like, well, or are you just not realizing that we're all human beings and spirits living in a physical body, and we're gonna have, you know, our shit come to the surface, and it's okay. Like, this just sometimes it's just as simple as managing life. Like, we're both pressed for time, and someone's got to do the dishes, and it's as simple as that.
Yes. And it's not unspiritual. It's not unspiritual to have these human, everyday, normal things that happen. They're once you start having a spiritual practice and a spiritual, you know, lifestyle, that doesn't mean that you get to be exempt from being human. There are going to be moments where little things bother you. And your spirituality is the tool for helping you to respond to those things, maybe a little bit differently, but it doesn't mean that you're immune from being a human. And the same thing is true of sex too, because, oh my gosh, I love that in the conversation of sacred sexuality, sex is just this perfect meeting of heaven and earth. We've got our higher intentions. We've got these beautiful ideals about, love and the connection and the magic of all of it. That can be opened, or whatever might be opened, or even self-empowerment, or, an inner fire that might be opened, if not love between two people, but something beautiful that can open. But then here's the physical body that is sometimes looks like a choreographed, beautiful, love scene in a movie, maybe, but a lot of times is not. It can be ungraceful, and sex is also the part of us that's animal instinct. It's very, 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 very physical and multifaceted. So if you can be okay with both of those sides of yourself, and you can acknowledge and be in, both of those energies, I think that you probably get the most out of it, and at least honor the completeness of your humanness, I think, perhaps.
Yeah, I think it's good to honor and know that before people get into connections and relationships, because I've had clients myself where they're really excited about meeting this really amazing person, and they do, and then the reality kicks in a little bit, and it throws them. They're like, "Oh, we fell out about this." And like, well, that's okay. It's really about how you handle it and how you can communicate with someone. But if they don't expect that, if they think it's all going to be up here, then it completely knocks them over and like Jared would say, like, I'm out because you won't do the dishes. Like, there are human things, and especially if you're going to be with someone that you're going to have, you're going to be intimate with, and you're going to be having sex with, because triggers are going to come out when you're putting the bodies together. And I remember this was probably about a month ago. I had a few female clients who got into relationships, and they weren't in their root. And they all had the same problem. It's really interesting. And I'd love your take on this. So if we can go into the sex conversation, because it's just going to get really juicy. Yeah. And what they noticed was, if they weren't in their root and they were trying to have sex with a man, if they were trying to be intimate with a man, a partner, the man couldn't be in them for very long. They couldn't penetrate for very long.
Yeah.
They're all up here and there's no energy in here. And as soon as they penetrated, they either lost their erection, or they'd ejaculate really quickly, or they'd need to just have a break. It was like there was no energy being pulled down into that place. And it's the same with men. If they're not really grounded, they have issues as well.
Yes.
Things like that. But it's like the energy has to be running parallel in both of the lower chakras for you guys to have the best experience anyway.
Yes. Right. Which is why I love that, because, it's a great example of why it is important to establish at least a kind of rapport and understanding and readiness in a relationship before the sex happens, because it's just going to be better sex. It's just going to be better for everybody. Because a lot of times there can be people who maybe are capable of getting down into their root and their sacral chakras and that kind of thing under the right circumstances, when they feel safe with their partner, when they feel seen or validated or whatever. But even if their mind is on board, and part of them thinks, yes, I'm ready, and let's jump in, let's dive in and do this. There might be a deeper part of them, an instinctual part, or another emotional part of them that maybe isn't ready, and then we hide and we scaffold out of our body a little bit, out of the lower chakras, and we're not inhabiting our full body. We're not fully present with them because we're not intimate yet with them at other levels of being before doing this incredibly powerful alchemy with another person. So I think it's good to establish, like, okay, let's get on the same page and calibrate at the level of all of our chakras, because lovers, especially the ones that are like long-term lovers, the way I've been able to kind of perceive it is it's as if we build bridges between each chakra level. So you've got the intellectual connection and maybe a spiritual connection here at these upper chakra levels. You communicate with the throat chakra. There's emotion that is exchanged and understood at the level of the heart. We go down into the lower chakras and we create these bridges that cross there at each level down the way. So taking a little bit of time to know the person, I think is just kind of key. Sex itself also is a language and also is a way of getting to know someone, but it's just something that for many individuals, maybe not all, but for many of us, it takes a bit of preparation and at least knowing ourselves very strongly, knowing what we expect out of it, what we don't expect, what we want, what we don't want, what we're comfortable with, what we're not comfortable with. And sometimes expectations are not our friends. I've just kind of noticed that with things that all three of us have kind of mentioned today so far, where it's like the expectation is the thing that gets in the way, because that's what we attract is not always the thing that we expect. The airy fairy roses and cupcakes, perfect, blah, 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 whatever spiritual partnership. We attract what we need, what we really need. So trust, humble the ego and trust what it is you attracted. Even if it's the person that doesn't clean up after themselves, or they make annoying, kind of comments or whatever. It's probably exactly what you're supposed to be working with and facing in that moment.
I love the point that you made about having those different levels of intimacy at the chakra level. I think when we look at society, we've been conditioned to establish a sexual connection as quickly as possible. And where I've seen most relationships, even in my own life up until probably within the last 4 years especially, is there's a sexual connection for most. And this is how we're conditioned, at least by movies, by things like this. There's usually a sexual connection, and then that connection moves up to the heart, and then a heart connection is established, and then it moves up to the mental, the thought, or the third eye, and then people start getting in fights, and then they break up. And it's like, well, what if we worked from a reverse way? What if we worked from the mind at the thought level, created intimacy mentally, and then communicated more, then created emotional intimacy, and then consummated it at the sexual level, and working a different track or a different pattern.
I think it's all about too. I love how you just said too, because there are a lot of people that approach it from the lowest chakra level up. And I think so long as like both partners are kind of on the same page, because I can imagine scenarios in which both partners are equally coming at it from the root chakra, and then they're making their way up and letting the relationship go that way, where it can work out just fine. But you've got to kind of both be at the same page and have a compatibility. I'm a musician, so sometimes I think of the chakras in terms of like a scale of tones. So if you are both at a tone where you've got a harmonious matching, it's like I'm approaching this from my root chakra and you're approaching this from your root chakra, or vice versa, crown chakra, or something in between where there's a harmony that makes sense. Then great. You're going to likely match and probably make something compatible, because both partners are valuing the same things. And values and morals aren't always the same things. I mean, morals are kind of like ideals that people don't always live up to sometimes, but a value, it can be what you're actively valuing. So if you're actively both on the exact same page, valuing, yes, now is the time to have sex. Maybe it's the first night we've even met each other kind of thing, but we're both completely on the same page. We're both open in this way. There's not one partner who's approaching it from the standpoint that says, I'm up here in my upper chakras, I'm looking for my soulmate, I'm looking for destiny. And the other person says, I'm just looking for a good buck. Then of course they're going to be completely on different pages, and it's not going to maybe work so well. But if you can tune with another person, if you can match with another person at a level that's compatible, I think that you could probably build a connection from that. Yeah.
You can go, Laura.
What I was going to say was, like, with what you were saying about attracting, like you're up here and you want this, and they're down there wanting that. What would you say to people who, I get a lot of clients that attract the same thing over and over again, and I always say, what is it? Like, they're trying to show you something in yourself. Are you looking at it? And if you're not, or if you're healing it on an energetic level, but you're not taking any action, we talked about this last week. You're not taking any action to say, oh, I see you. You look like you're someone that's just maybe a bit of a fuckboy. I'm going to say no to you. If you keep letting that in, you're just repeating the same cycle over and over again. So what would you say to people that keep bringing in someone that doesn't have the same values or isn't in the same place, and they keep bringing in that same individual? What advice would you give on that?
Oh my gosh, I love that point, because it's such a common experience for us. And I get so many people asking about that same thing too. I first of all like to comment that the perspective that I've been able to glean from people that repeatedly attract the same pattern is that these are karmic relationships. there is an irresistible, delicious chemistry that occurs between two people when they are the perfect match for triggering all of your issues, all of your crap. um, and that will keep happening until you kind of learn your lesson. So sometimes it can be relevant for someone to maybe enter into that relationship with the person who is going to trigger those issues and those challenges. So maybe let's say the person has issues with self-esteem and they keep attracting, partners over and over and over again that just walk all over them and treat them badly. And, a lot of times I've also noticed that you're attracted to that type because someone treated you that way at some point in your life, to cause you to just have this invisible force field around you that just seems to be a magnet for that same kind of energy. So here's the person in our example with the low self-esteem. They want this unattainable person who's not going to be good for their self-esteem, who's maybe going to walk all over them, like we said, because it's almost like they're trying to get their power back in that situation and say, well, if I can just convince this one person to love me and approve of me and win them over, then maybe I'll feel better about myself and I'll love myself. So if you're attracting someone that repeatedly is bad for you, a pattern, in other words, that you're not comfortable with, that you don't like, it's likely telling you that there's something that you can shift in your relationship with yourself that would change the thing that you are attracting on the outside. Now, if you have done the work, maybe you broke up with the negative partner that was walking all over you and not good for your self-esteem, good, but you then attracted the next guy, and I've seen this so many times with people, who's the same way with you, the next partner is the same way with you, and it's, again, that is when you have this magical opportunity to practice self-love, to put it into practice by saying no to that person, by saying, even though there is a part of me that is just so attracted and so curious and so interested in this person who's falling under the same category as all these other, not so great relationships in the past, I am going to say no. I'm going to step back and push the value of I love myself and I value health and well-being above this knee-jerk feeling of attraction that I have. And literally in making a choice like that, an action and a choice like that does something to just powerfully reprogram law of attraction around you and reprogram the kind of thing that you're looking for. Because guess what? The spell will eventually wear off. You're going to stop being attracted to that person eventually. If it comes from this karmic, egoic, whatever, it's not real love. You're not missing out on your soulmate of a lifetime kind of thing. You're going to get over it. And it's going to help you to shift your perspective. You're going to have a different view of things, and that actively working on shifting your priorities and your values, it's going to change what you're starting to be attracted to, because it's going to start having you launch just sort of desires or curiosities of what would it be like to be with a partner who's not that way, or who is something that maybe matches this value that I'm now working really hard to put up as my number one top thing. So yeah, I think that's important.
Sarah, I love that. That was so exciting to hear, and I had like a gazillion questions pop up into my mind. But I think one of the most important, maybe most important, one of the things that I remember thinking about years ago when I was trying to move on from a different type of attraction of a person, how do you switch? So like, I remember I was involved in a really deep relationship 4 years ago, not healthy. And I remember after I broke up with her, it was about maybe 6 months to a year later, and I was still attracting that same character type. And I had to actually say, like, nope, I'm not going after her. And then it wasn't until about 1.5 to 2 years after that relationship that I could see I had a whole new template for a different type of woman coming into my life. So how, in your experience and your understanding, how do you get that new template to come in?
Yes. Well, for me, the thing that I always go back to is standards. I think that it can be a little bit of a transitional process, right? Because you can decide in one fell swoop, okay, these are the qualities that I'd like in a partner kind of thing, but then continue to attract them. So you have to keep practicing over and over, holding the standards where you want them to be, so that eventually those become your new normal. Sometimes I like to use the analogy. It's sort of like when you're practicing getting stronger in your physical body. You can go to the gym once and do, squats and push-ups and all of these things, but you don't get just to go once and then not go back and expect to have a perfect bodybuilder body. You have to keep going back, and then your body will develop that baseline strength. Then you'll be able to, maybe run the mile without your lungs getting too tired, and you'll be more comfortable with it. Same thing with relationships or any other emotional or spiritual thing that you practice. The more that you implement it repeatedly, every time you come up against the same situation. So if it's a dating situation, you notice, there's a red flag. That person is not meeting the standard that I would like to hold in my life. And watch them do it over little things and keep the standard high and no tolerance for the things that are most important to you. So if you don't want someone who will lie to you and you see them, maybe lying to someone in a way that seems like, oh, that's not too bad. Their friend wants to hang out, and instead of saying, oh, I'm busy, they make up an excuse and they lie or something like that. It shows that they're capable of doing that at other levels, and there's a reason why that dishonesty might be there. So when you start to notice the little things, and a lot of people can notice them on the first date. You don't have to waste, 6 months dating someone to figure out that they might not be a match for your values. So hold the standard high from the beginning. Look and observe at the ways that, either the partner applies and fits that standard or does not right from the very beginning, and to know when to walk away, either to talk to them about it and see if they're willing to, maybe grow with you and change with you if it's worth it, and it's not a make it or break it kind of issue that they've crossed the boundary on. Sometimes with little things, yes, there are partners that work with one another. And that applies back to what we were talking about before, where it's like, no two human beings are perfect, they're going to have no problems and they're just going to get along perfectly. There's never going to be any arguments or any issues. Every single couple is going to have little imperfections and little things. It's just, how willing are you to work on it and to talk about it and to hone the practice, whether of the relationship or of the sex that's happening between the two people, communicating and working on it. If there's a willingness to do that, that's great. Or if you can see that there's not, and it's really the standard has been crossed, or they have no capability to understand why you hold this standard or value, and they're not going to fulfill that thing, then knowing when to walk away is important. But it's just got to be a regular practice, I think.
Could you go into, so how we talk about being aware enough, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
You can see their red flags. And I know that in my experience, this has only happened twice, where I'm like, I see it. Oh, okay, I'm going to have to say no to that. It hurts my heart, but I know that I've dealt with that for the last 5 years and I'm not going back. And I had to say no. And it was really difficult, but my whole life changed and the whole template of men. But what advice would you give to someone who's in that energy where you are afraid? Because a lot of it is, like you were saying earlier, if I can heal that person, I heal myself. If I can just fix them, if they can see me, then my dad, who never saw me, would see me. They're trying to heal something in themselves. What would you say to people who are still getting that and they're too scared to say what first of all, what would you say they're so afraid of with saying no, and how can they kind of break through that?
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes. That's so important, because we need to know where to draw the line, I think, between we're working on it, and that's a healthy thing. We're maybe making progress while working on it, and both partners are doing their 50-50 to work on it, versus when is it just, I'm working on this, nothing's getting done, I'm the only one doing the work, it's very imbalanced, and then I need to walk away. It's the way your marker for that is to see, are they putting their effort in?
Mm-hmm.
Your partner doesn't have to have the same exact thought processes as you. They don't have to see things and emote the exact same way that you have, that you deal with your emotions. It can be a person with a completely different, family conditioning and emotional, structure and perspective on life, as all different human beings, are varied in these ways. But if you can still get on the same page to the extent where it's like, even though we have imperfections, I can see that this person is definitely doing 100% as far as what they are capable of doing to make this relationship better. This person is putting all of their effort in, and I'm holding them accountable for doing their work and doing that too. And if it's something that they're completely in control of, changing or healing or fixing or doing that's good for everybody involved in the relationship, and again, both partners are doing that, they both are putting in their 50-50, then great, stay at that point. But the point when you start to observe that it's like, okay, I'm the only one who's doing any of the work. I'm the one who keeps saying, let's have a serious sit down and let's talk about it. Or I'm always the one that's giving, or whatever it might be, or making excuses for this other person, or asking them, can you please behave differently or treat me differently, if they're hurting you, and then they don't, then that's the point where you need to walk away, where you're the only one, kind of doing the work. And if they won't step up, even after talking with them about that, then I think that's when that's usually the time to separate or make a very different dynamic in that relationship.
Sarah, I want to take a couple more questions between us. I want to bring also questions from the audience. Are you okay with that? Are you good for going for another 20 minutes or so?
Sure, that sounds fun. Yes.
Okay, cool. Because we're getting a lot of good questions and comments. And so guys, if you're watching this and you have questions, please just feel free to put them in the comments box and I will bring them up onto the screen, and then we'll dive and tackle it however we see fit or however it unrolls. I'm really interested in the standards that you were talking about earlier, because I've noticed that, and there's been a couple of comments and questions around this, that you can have a certain standard for something, and that standard creates the energetic boundary almost. And you can fall on your standards or you can hold them up really tightly. What do you think for you, Sarah, is the middle ground? Because sometimes when you have standards, like I've had standards for things and I'm like really, really high. And then I kind of noticed I was being somewhat of an asshole in certain areas. Super high standards, But then also you don't want to deprive yourself of the value that you bring either to a relationship. So can you talk more about, and can we explore a little bit more the connection between having standards and values, but also at the same time not having expectations that are so high up there that you're just living your entire life in a lone corner without anyone coming in?
Oh yes. Oh my gosh. I love where this conversation is going. It's amazing. Because it's such an important point, right? We were talking about the need to balance, these two kinds of energies in multiple areas so far. And it's true that a lot of times when you hold standards that are extremely, extremely high, and I've noticed this for myself, oh my goodness, that the perfectionism comes from fear. Perfectionism comes from, I need to hold this standard to the level that it has to be perfect, because if not, I don't feel safe or comfortable or whatever in this interaction or this relationship. I need this other person to hold the standard really, really high with me. That's a point at which it starts to get a little unrealistic, because as we were talking about before, we're all human. We all have our humanness. And, it can be hard to be in a relationship if you're not willing to honor the fact that your partner's not going to be perfect. And you're not going to be perfect to your partner, even if you are someone with really great values and you feel super woke, you've got all these great standards and you've done all this spiritual work. Doesn't matter. You're probably still going to have moments where you make your mistakes and your missteps. So humility, humbleness, I think is one of the most important things for us to practice, where you can say, you know what, ideally I want to hold some really great standards and priorities for my relationship, for my, connections with others. But I'm going to have a little bit of flexibility on those things and be willing to listen to my partner if they say, hey, this here is not quite so realistic, or this is how this now makes me feel, and it's causing an issue in our relationship because, X, Y, or Z. Being, flexible and being willing to change yourself while you're in a partnership, I think is key for a partnership to work. I think it's that's something that people shy away from, because they're saying, oh, I don't want to change for my relationship. And it's not changing in a superficial way where it's like, oh, she wants me to grow my hair long, so I'm going to do it because I just want to be accepted. There's an unhealthy way to change in a relationship, but there's also a very deeply healthy and necessary way to change for a relationship where it's like, yeah, okay, I'm going to learn how to be more patient with certain things that are probably good for you, things that are probably going to humble your ego a little bit and make you maybe a more aware or strong or kind or open individual. So having some flexibility is really good. And then just knowing too, when you evaluate your standards, because they're different for everybody, right? Like each individual has different standards that are important to them. Know which ones are your lines that are kind of, we won't say uncrossable, but are really important to you. Maybe the most important of the other ones. So if it's
deal breakers,
deal breakers, I don't want dishonesty, or I don't want, cheating and infidelity, or I don't want whatever, then make it known that that's one of your standards because it's a basic, healthy, kind of thing. And, maybe if your partner, there are many, many partnerships where there's infidelity and then things heal, and that's great. You just have to measure it case by case basis and see, are we, again, both going to do the 50-50 work thing and be flexible with one another and talk this out and get on the same page to where this is a healthy thing and then the relationship is working. So yeah, flexibility and being humble and being willing to let your expectations crumble sometimes if that's what you need is important too. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think we go in thinking, well, these are my standards, these are my red flags, but then we also have to remember that there's two people, and that person is going to have their standard, and then there may be areas that we don't meet their standard, and actually, by being open and flexible, like you say, we're going to learn more about ourselves. We're going to learn to be more patient. We're going to learn how to speak more kindly. We're going to learn how to be more loving, and we're going to learn something about us. So we have to kind of find the balance of like, okay, but that's really, I can't go, that's a red flag for me, and that to me is going to lead to something maybe toxic or a little bit dangerous. I can't go there with that person. But then okay, so I need to be a little bit more flexible with my time or how I approach things.
Yes,
because that's their standard, and I can meet that because it makes me a better person. It feels right? Yeah.
Yes. I think it's all about knowing yourself, knowing where your wiggle room is, and where you need to be really strong with where the standard or boundary is.
Absolutely. So should we go? Sorry, I was going to.
Yep, I'm going to bring on a question right now. So this is coming from Try Fitness, and they say, speaking of standards, if your person has difficulty speaking / expressing feelings, we are healing after her infidelity, do you suggest I honor her words or her actions? Great question.
That is such a great question. Oh my gosh. You're going to want to make sure that actually, from what I feel, that there's a little bit of both that you're honoring in this situation, that you're not just maybe, I think, leaning on one or the other. I know that there are a lot of people in this world that have a lot of difficulty putting their feelings into words. And that's where it can be important to be patient with your partner if you know that about them ahead of time, that maybe they don't have the same, background and experiences that you've had that have given you the chance to develop a language and a familiarity with talking to your heart and being very, very real and honest about these kinds of things. So if the relationship is worth it to you, which it sounds like it is because you're working on it, if it's worth it to both of you to work on healing this relationship, then it's very relevant for both of you to work on the communication stuff. And depending on the couple, sometimes things like couples therapy can be really great fit for them because it gives them something that helps them learn some structure around communicating their feelings together and that kind of thing. Maybe that's not their style, and it's just better for them to kind of sit down together and start to talk and ask each other questions and that kind of thing. But in addition to that, because, with infidelity, it creates a lot of difficulties on both sides of the relationship. For the person that was cheated on, we'll say it can create issues with trust. So it's important for that person sometimes to have a little bit of extra communication where they get to know their partner more so that they can start to rebuild bridges of trust. And for the partner who did the cheating, to get to know themselves better. Because honestly, a lot of the times cheating occurs, there's no judgment here on that at all, when there is some kind of emotional thing that you're looking to fulfill. It's not just about, oh, well, I had a physical attraction and then blah, it just happened. There's usually something more happening at the level of the psyche and the emotion. So having conversations is really, really great for both sides of the relationship to get to know each other better and to help to establish better bridges of communication. Now, on the action side of things, that's really important too, because you're going to want her to show you now. Obviously, you've chosen to forgive her. Obviously, you've chosen, okay, we're working on this. We're healing on this together. So if that's the choice that you made, then it's going to be important to say, okay, well, I already chose to forgive her. So as much as it hurts me to think about the actions that did happen, that broke my heart or whatever it was with the infidelity, then I can't make that the center focal point. I can't make that the standard by which I judge and see this partner in my life. I have to include many other things. So what are her actions like now? Is she showing you in other ways that she can be trustworthy and a support for you and there for you? If she did something to break trust, is she owning responsibility and doing things to fix it? If you went into somebody's house and broke something, you'd probably offer to either fix it or replace it, So is she doing that with you? So actions and communication, I think, are both equally important.
Yeah.
I love that answer. That's fantastic, Sarah. I always look at people for their words, but also their actions and then their long-term patterns. And I would say I completely agree in the sense with the sexuality and the emotional connection. I think some people just don't have the ability. They haven't developed their communication skills yet to be able to voice their true feelings. And infidelity, I've seen in my own experience with working with individuals, a lot of the times they think they want a sexual connection, but really they want an emotional connection, and the emotional connection that person's giving them, they misperceive as a sexual connection. So then they act on that.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And that just reminded me of, I was listening to some kind of a talk that was given by an author named Esther Perel. She is a psychotherapist who her entire career is devoted to specifically couples counseling, specializing in infidelity. And I thought it was so interesting. I just listened to this little talk that she gave, but she said that when people are unfaithful, it's usually because they're looking for a piece of themselves that they feel that they have lost in some kind of way. And that is no fault of their partner. It's not because their partner wasn't fulfilling something that they should have fulfilled and the partner made a mistake and whatever. It's oftentimes people cheat when they're perfectly happy. They've been married, 20 years, they have beautiful children. They don't want for the life of them to leave that marriage. They want everything in that marriage. They don't love their spouse any less, but there's unfaithfulness there because they're looking for a piece of themselves that they feel like, they have lost. And that kind of makes sense because, as we said before, relationships are like our mirrors. So sometimes we go towards these things that have a tendency to bring out more self-discovery. Not that that's a healthy way to do it. Don't do this. Don't do it that way. That's not the healthy way to do it. But that just kind of gives us a little insight onto, okay, why did I behave that way? Okay, maybe there's a part of me that needs to address something that I can do for myself. We all have to take responsibility for ourselves, right? I can do for myself to uplift myself emotionally to where maybe I'm not prone to making imbalanced choices that hurt myself and others.
Wow.
It's funny because I in the 4 years I've done this, I can't tell you how many emails I get with that exact same thing, where it's normally women and they're in a marriage and they have children and they say, but I'm so drawn to this other person. I'm so pulled to them. And it's because that person is showing them something in themselves that they could really learn something from. And my advice was always, well, you can learn that on your own. You don't have to make it hurt people, because they're like, oh, I still love my person, but I'm pulled to this person. Well, what are they showing you in yourself? And why do you feel pulled to that? And when you're around them, what do they make you feel like? And when you're not around them and they're not showing up, then what pain does that bring up in you? Because they're showing you something and you're kind of craving. You think that it's going to be better over here, but actually there's just more lessons. There's more, but you can do that on your own within yourself. Because if you go to that person and you're with them for 5 years and then, I feel really pulled to that person, because the energy in you is still the same.
Yes.
So if you heal it in yourself and you find it in yourself, then you're not going to keep getting pulled in all these different directions.
Yes. Yes. That grass is always greener psychology, right? And it's just not, and it's, it's that doesn't usually, changing the relationship, it doesn't usually solve the problem of the thing that we're looking for inside. So it's true. We can do these things on our own, and we can also do them with our partner too. We can say, okay, I've identified that I have these feelings or these needs or these things, and it is my responsibility as an individual to fulfill these things and to be healthy and to carry my own emotional baggage in a relationship, not making your partner carry it for you. But you can still have conversations with them and bring them into the picture, and kind of explore together. That's the beauty of having a partner, is that you've got a support system where you can bounce ideas off of one another and come to life and grow and transform together. So yeah.
Beautiful. I'm going to bring up the next question here, guys. You ready for it?
Yes.
All right. So this is Sinibini. That's fun. That's fun to say. She says, hi, you guys. Recently, my boyfriend and I broke up. I tend to regret the breakup and ask myself if I want to be back together. How do I know if I'm just drawn to similar wounds or really love?
Wow. Yeah. I think that that's a very, very, very common thing. And I actually would love to just say, remember how before we were talking about when you have a lover or a partner, you build bridges at the level of each chakra. When you break up, you've got to break those. And it takes time to detach those things, especially if you can almost imagine that there's a part of your energy body that's sort of reaching out and connecting with this person. And now there's just this broken thing and the energy is just falling out into the universe. You don't know. It takes a while for a wound to close, in other words. So number one, give yourself more time, because judging from a place of these immediate knee-jerk feelings is not going to be judging based on truth. It's in the same way that, I think it's the 12-step program that says something to the effect of feelings are not facts. Feelings are sort of like weather. It can be stormy and the waves are going all over the place one day, but behind all of those rain clouds, the sun is still shining. There are still constants. And you kind of have to give yourself time to let the dust settle for a while, for those broken bridges to kind of close up and for you to become an individual person and grow a little bit on your journey, I think, before you can discover, I don't know what you guys think, but before you can discover whether or not it's real love and you should go back, or, maybe I'm just really craving the intimacy that I'm very used to having in my life.
I love that. Oh, sorry. You can go, Laura. Go for it.
What I was going to say was, and it's important to understand what you miss in that person, because if you don't figure out how to, in a way, soothe yourself, you're just going to find another person to just attach that to and be like, okay, now I feel better because now I feel safe, now I feel secure, now I feel valued and loved and adored because this person's doing it. But if we can kind of turn that inwards and be that within ourselves, then we're going to attract healthy relationships afterwards. And it's not going to feel, because I always think that love, from what I've experienced, love is it feels different to that. When you meet someone and you're pulled to them, you're like, oh my God, I can't live without them. That to me is a red flag instantly. Like if you get pulled to someone and you're like, oh, I can't live without them, that is like a wound. That's a wound. But if you meet someone and you think, this is just nice, there's something here, I want to explore this, that's a whole different energy. So connection and dependence is like a whole, I think people get from movies. They watch movies and these couples meet and they're like, oh my God, I love you, I need you. And it's like, guys, that's a trauma connection right there. That's like a wound. It's pulling you. So you want to be very aware of how you feel when you meet someone. And it's the same with when you miss someone, that like, oh my God, I feel like something's missing inside me with them gone. That's something that you can really learn. You can learn more about yourself by figuring out how that occurred and why. And you can really let that go so that you don't have that sort of unhealthy pull towards yourself.
Sarah, I love what you shared about the energies, and it's not just their bridges. They're not just these cords that you can just cut one day and then the next second you feel superb and you're completely over the relationship. One of the most frustrating things that I think when I came into the coaching world and the healing world was this concept of cutting cords, and then it's like, oh, I just cut the cords and you're fine. Like, yeah, you just cut the cords, call the energy back in, you're good. I think that's like a part of it for sure.
Yeah.
But I view the chakras and those bridges as streams. And if water's been flowing towards a certain person, a certain energy, that person is expressing a certain archetype from the collective, and you've invested a lot of consciousness energy in them, it's going to take some time, depending on how much you invested in them, to get that energy back, because it's not like a one cut done and deal that, okay, cool, like you're on, like go on to that next relationship in 12 hours, you're good to go. It's gonna take some time, and the heart needs to grieve. There needs to be a pullback of your energies, and all that can take time.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And I love that analogy of the streams, because like if you think of a like a river, like in a water bed or something, if it's all dried up, you can still see the place in the land where the river had been etching its spot, and it takes time before there's no longer an imprint. So I think kind of like, okay, yes, you've cleared the corridor, you've made a different choice, you've stepped back from the relationship, but now like there's an imprint there, and it takes time to fill it in or to reroute the energy to flow in a very different direction. It takes conscious work, and sometimes, yes, totally, as both of you have said, we need that independent space before we can identify how to do that. So I think that's helpful.
I'm going to bring up one more question here, Sarah, and then you want to close it up?
Sure, that sounds great.
Awesome. So this is from Crystal, and Crystal says, I was told in meditation that I'm to seek my spiritual teacher. I'm manifesting beautiful things in my life, but I feel this pull to finding a person in my high vibe tribe. That's fun to say. A relationship later. Any advice? So I think the question is, it sounds like she's asking to find the right type of mentor, but also the tribe as well, community and people she can look up to. That's how I read it. I'm not sure if you guys read it that way.
Yeah, that's kind of what it sounded like to me too. Yeah. Well, that's an important one. I get a fair amount of questions that are like that. And I think definitely, Crystal, if you're getting guidance and meditation, intuitive feelings, regularly that say, I want to find, a mentor, I want to find a spiritual teacher, just taking a few action steps towards doing that. And usually heaven, the universe, whatever you want to call it, will take 1,000 steps towards you. So sometimes just going, somewhere in your community where you might be able to find people to connect with. Let's say if there's a meditation group or something that you gravitate towards and you resonate with best in terms of your spiritual interests and practice, just take a little baby step and then see what the universe starts to bring out, because usually you'll attract the right mentors and the right tribe, the right friends and people.
Yeah, and you want to surround yourself with people that you are inspired by as well, like the tribe, because we have a tendency to want to meet people that are really similar to us, which is great because we want to be able to have that thing in common. But we also would you say that you want to like look at someone and go, that person really inspires me, they embody something that would actually serve me, I don't know how to do that. And the more you spend time with these people and these mentors, the more you grow. So surrounding yourself with people that, like, I've learned stuff from Jared. We have the same philosophy in the right, but there's that he can do that I can't do, and he's do that, and I'm sure vice versa. So it's like you want to surround yourself with people that are similar and that bring good energy. Because people, I get this a lot as well. People wanting that tribe, but look at people and be like, wow, I like how they live their life. I like if you look at someone and look at their life, unless they kind of have what you would like, you know, like if people give advice, like mentors give advice, and your tribe will give advice. But if you look at how they live their life, you're really going to know if that's the advice that you want to take. You might look at their life and go, yeah, but that's a mess. Like, I don't want that. I'm going to end up in the shit. So it's like, I think it's so important, especially for women as well. I'm sure it's the same for men, but I'm sure you have people around you that you just think, I honor these people so much. And our energy is women so much. It's so powerful when we're together. And we just want to look for people that inspire us, because we've become who we spend time with.
Yes, that's totally true. I love that.
Yeah.
I always look, whenever I'm looking at mentors or people to be around, I always look at their being and their doing. Is the doing that they're doing in the world what I want to be doing? And are the being and who they're being as they do it, is that who I want to be as well? And that's pretty much my standard, is what are they doing and what are they being as they do it? And do I align to both of those?
Yeah. I think that's perfect. That's like that old adage of, well, it doesn't necessarily have to be smarter, but there's like this old saying that's like, surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. Be not the smartest person in the room, and you'll be in the right company, because it will help you kind of and train up to that kind of level. But it's true. It's just what inspires you. Be around the energies that you want to be in.
Sarah, this is my last question here, and then we'll go. You're going down in a plane, or you're about to die in 10 minutes. What's the last thing that you want to say in the last message that you want to deliver to humanity and everyone?
That is such a good question. Oh my goodness. Okay, so the first thing that comes to mind that's so funny. This sounds morbid, but it's not morbid at all. Sometimes I think about death because I get asked questions about it, quite a bit. And I think we all contemplate death. And I kind of understand it as a thing that is really safe. The way that I understand it is that it's the most beautiful rite of passage that a human being has, to return home, to go home to source, to God, to love. So I guess mine would be everything's okay. Like the last thing I would say to humanity is love each other. Everything is perfectly fine. Do not fear. Fear not. Focus on love. All is well. You're safe. Everything's perfect.
Wow, I love it. That's such a beautiful message. That's a perfect ending point. I think just knowing that that's always there and that's always on the other side, and it's not really the other side, it's actually directly connected to us. I love it. That's beautiful. Sarah, thanks so much for coming on. We really appreciate your energy. I know everyone watching really appreciates you coming on. I've shared your link right there below. So everyone who's watching this, if you want to subscribe to Sarah's channel or you want more information about her, just go to that first link in the description box here. And also, Laura and I are going to continue on with the Sacred Sexuality web series. Our next interview is going to be March 4th. We're also going to be doing a live around Tantra, so be looking out for that. If you guys haven't registered, that's also in the YouTube description box right below where Sarah's link to her channel is. Sarah, thank you so much for coming on. It's really been an honor and a pleasure.
Oh my gosh, I could talk to you guys for hours. You're the best. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming on. We feel very similar. We'll thank you so much. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.